Biafra, the Aburi Accord, official record of the minutes of the meeting of Nigeria's military leaders held at Aburi, Ghana, on January 4th and 5th, 1967. Opening. The chairman of the Ghana National Liberation Council, Lieutenant General J.A. Ankra, declaring the meeting open, welcomed the visitors to Ghana and expressed delight that Ghana had been agreed upon by the Nigerian military leaders as the venue for this crucial meeting. He considered the whole matter to be the domestic affair of Nigeria, and as such, he refrained from dwelling on any specific points. The general, however, expressed the belief that the Nigerian problems were not such that cannot be easily resolved through patience, understanding, and mutual respect. Throughout history, he said, there has been no failure of military statesmen, and the eyes of the whole world were on the Nigerian army. He advised that soldiers are purely statesmen and not politicians, and the Nigerian military leaders owe it as a responsibility to the 56 million people of Nigeria to successfully carry through their task of nation building. Concluding, the general urged the Nigerian leaders to bury their differences, forget the past, and discuss their matter frankly but patiently. Lieutenant Colonel Gowon invited the Nigerian leaders to say a joint thank you to their host, and all said thank you in unison in response to Lieutenant General Ankra's address. At this point, the general vacated the conference table. Importation of arms and resolution renouncing the use of force. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu spoke next. He said that the agenda was acceptable to him, subject to the comments he had made on some of the items. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu said that no useful purpose would be served by using the meeting as a cover for arms buildup and accused the federal military government of having engaged in large-scale arms deals by sending Major Apollo to negotiate for arms abroad. He alleged that the federal military government recently paid £1 million for some arms bought from Italy and now stored up in Kaduna. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu was reminded by the military governor, North and other members, that the East was indulging in an arms buildup and that the plane carrying arms which recently crashed on the Cameroon's border was destined for Enugu. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu denied both allegations. Concluding his remarks on arms buildup, Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu proposed that if the meeting was to make any progress, all the members must at the outset adopt a resolution to renounce the use of force in the settlement of Nigerian dispute. Lieutenant Colonel Gowon explained that as a former Chief of Staff Army, he was aware of the deficiency in the country's arms and ammunition, which needed replacement. Since the Defense Industries Corporation could not produce these, the only choice was to order from overseas. An order was accordingly placed to the tune of £750,000. He said to the best of his knowledge, the actual amount that had been paid out was only £80,000. As to why these arms were sent up to the north, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon referred to lack of storage facilities in Lagos and reminded his military colleagues of the number of times arms and ammunition had been dumped in the sea. This was why, he said, it became necessary to use the better storage facilities in Kaduna. The arms and ammunition had not been distributed because they arrived only 2 weeks previously and have not yet been taken on charge. After exhaustive discussion to which all members contributed, and during which Lieutenant Colonel Ejor pointed out that it would be necessary to determine what arms and ammunitions had arrived and what each unit of the army had before any further distribution would take place. The Supreme Military Council unanimously adopted a declaration proposed by Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu that all members renounce the use of force as a means of settling the Nigerian crisis, reaffirm their faith in discussions and negotiation as the only peaceful way of resolving the Nigerian crisis, and agree to exchange information on the quantity of arms and ammunition available in each unit of the army in each region and in the unallocated stores, and to share out such arms equitably to the various commands. Agree that there should be no more importation of arms and ammunition until normalcy was restored. The full text of the declaration was signed by all members. The Supreme Military Council, having acknowledged the fact that the series of disturbances since January 15, 1966, have caused disunity in the army, resulting in lack of discipline and loss of public confidence, turned their attention to the question of how best the army should be reorganized in order to restore that discipline and confidence. There was a lengthy discussion of the subject, and when the arguments became involved, members retired into secret session. On their return, they announced that agreement had been reached by them on the reorganization, administration, and control of the army on the following lines. Army to be governed by the Supreme Military Council, under a chairman to be known as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and head of the federal military government. Establishment of a military headquarters, comprising equal representation from the regions and headed by a chief of staff. Creation of area commands, corresponding to existing regions and under the charge of area commanders. Matters of policy, including appointments and promotion to top executive posts in the armed forces and the police, to be dealt with by the Supreme Military Council. During the period of the military government, military governors will have control over area commands for internal security. Creation of a Lagos garrison, including Ikeja barracks. In connection with the reorganization of the army, the council discussed the distribution of military personnel with particular reference to the present recruitment drive. The view was held that general recruitment throughout the country in the present situation would cause great imbalance in the distribution of soldiers. After a lengthy discussion of the subject, the council agreed to set up a military committee on which each region will be represented to prepare statistics which will show present strength of Nigerian army, deficiency in each sector of each unit, the size appropriate for the country and each area command, additional requirements for the country and each area command. The committee is to meet and report to council within 2 weeks from the date of receipt of instructions. The council agreed that pending completion of the exercise in paragraph 7, further recruitment of soldiers should cease. In respect of item 3(b) of the agenda, implementation of the agreement reached on August 9, 1966, it was agreed, after a lengthy discussion, that it was necessary for the agreement reached on August 9 by the delegates of the regional governments to be fully implemented. In particular, it was accepted in principle that army personnel of northern origin should return to the north from the west. It was therefore felt that a crash program of recruitment and training, the details of which would be further examined after the committee to look into the strength and distribution of army personnel had reported, would be necessary to constitute indigenous army personnel in the west to a majority there quickly. Non-recognition by the East of Lieutenant Colonel Gowon as Supreme Commander 10. The question of the non-recognition by the East of Lieutenant Colonel Gowon as Supreme Commander and head of the federal military government was also exhaustively discussed. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu based his objection on the fact, inter alia, that no one can properly assume the position of Supreme Commander until the whereabouts of the former Supreme Commander, Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, was known. He therefore asked that the country be informed of the whereabouts of the Major General, and added that in his view, it was impossible in the present circumstances for any one person to assume any effective central command of the Nigerian army. Lieutenant Colonel Ejor enunciated 4 principles to guide the meeting in formulating an answer to the question of who should be Supreme Commander. There were the A. Problem of effective leadership, B. Crisis of confidence in the army, C. Disruption in the present chain of command, D. Inability of any soldier to serve effectively in any unit anywhere in the country. Lieutenant Colonel Gowon replied that he was quite prepared to make an announcement on the matter and regretted that a formal announcement had been delayed for so long, but the delay was originally intended to allow time for tempers to cool down. He reminded his colleagues that they already had the information in confidence. After further discussion and following the insistence by Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu that Lieutenant Colonel Gowon should inform members of what happened to the former Supreme Commander, members retired into secret session and subsequently returned to continue with the meeting after having reached an agreement among themselves. 11. At this point, the meeting adjourned until Thursday, January 5th, 1967. The power of the federal military government vis-à-vis the regional governments. 12. When the meeting resumed on the January 5th, it proceeded to consider the form of government best suited to Nigeria, in view of what the country has experienced in the past year, 1966. Members agreed that the legislative and executive authority of the federal military government should remain in the Supreme Military Council, to which any decision affecting the whole country shall be referred for determination, provided that where it is not possible for a meeting to be held, the matter requiring determination must be referred to military governors for their comment and concurrence. Specifically, the Council agreed that appointments to senior ranks in the police, diplomatic and consular services, as well as appointments to super-skill posts in the Federal Civil Service and the equivalent posts in statutory corporations, must be approved by the Supreme Military Council. The regional members felt that all the decrees or provisions of decrees passed since January 15, 1966, and which detracted from the previous powers and positions of regional governments, should be repealed if mutual confidence is to be restored. After this issue had been discussed at some length, the Council took the following decisions. The Council decided that 1. On the reorganization of the Army. A. Army to be governed by the Supreme Military Council, under a chairman to be known as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and head of the federal military government. B. Establishment of a military headquarters, comprising equal representation from the regions and headed by a Chief of Staff. C. Creation of area commands corresponding to existing regions and under the charge of area commanders. D. Matters of policy, including appointments and promotion to top executive posts in the armed forces and the police, to be dealt with by the Supreme Military Council. E. During the period of the military government, military governors will have control over area commands for internal security. F. Creation of a Lagos garrison, including Ikeja barracks. 2. On appointment to certain posts. The following appointments must be approved by Supreme Military Council. A. Diplomatic and consular posts. B. Senior posts in the armed forces and the police. C. Super-scale federal civil service and federal corporation posts. 3. On the functioning of the Supreme Military Council